Good morning. It's been all in the news lately about the Southern Baptist Church and the Paige Patterson comments about abuse and about women. And it's been something that's been on my heart and mind a lot over the past several years, actually, but especially over the past few weeks with all of the news reports coming out, talking about the church and its view and just how so many people try to encourage women to stay in these abusive relationships. And I'm speaking today kind of as part of my 100-day challenge because this is something that has been a personal issue in my own life, things that I have dealt with and struggles that I have had. And the thing that, as part of this challenge, and I'm really focusing on the healing part, is there are things that I allowed to take place because of my own beliefs. I mean, I was raised that divorce is wrong, no matter what, except for in cases of physical abuse. And then it's a time away and then prayer and reconciliation, which I know that's happened. I know of stories, we've all heard testimonies of how that's taken place and how that's happened. But for me, across the board, it was this internal belief of mine that divorce just wasn't an option. It was not okay. If I loved Christ and if I wanted to be a follower of His and I wanted to be a Christian, then there's no way I could do that and be divorced. And so I went through a lot of never any physical abuse. There was never any physical abuse at all, but a lot of emotional, verbal condescension, just so much mental stuff that I went through, walking on eggshells, never knowing what I was going to do or say that was going to cause my spouse to react in a negative manner. Many times it was silent treatments. Sometimes it was lashing out verbally. In the beginning, there was lots of anger. But through it all, I do feel like there was a disconnect. There was an idea of love, but there wasn't the concept of what Christ-like love is supposed to be like. And so that, I think, was the main source of the issue, was there was no real true love in the relationship. We had acts of love. There were times of happiness. There were times of, okay, this is going to work. But then it would always revert back. It was always seemed to just be a temporary. There wasn't a real true heart change in all that time. So about 5 years ago, I guess now, maybe 6, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we sought a marriage counselor. And we went to New Creation Counseling here in town, and we met with the counselor, and it was great for me. It was eye-opening. I felt that she understood. She sat and she talked with both of us. She listened. I shared a little bit of the issues that I had with her, how I just didn't feel respect. I didn't feel trusted. I wasn't valued. There was a lot of things that I just wasn't. And I was tired of not being that. And as I looked to the future with my kids going to be out of the house soon, I knew that it was the time to make changes, because there was no way that if we continued in that, there was no reason to stay once the kids were gone, because I wasn't going to live in that environment. And so we spent about a year in counseling with her, and then my spouse chose to not go. He didn't like some of the things she said about his parenting. He didn't like, I'm not sure exactly what he didn't like. There were many things that he didn't like about her. But she looked at me and she offered for me to continue seeing her. And at that moment, I was scared. I was like, can I come here alone? What is he going to think? What is he going to say? I don't know if I can do this. So I nodded and thanked her, and I walked out. And it was probably maybe a month or more. And I kept toying with the idea. I really wanted to go back and visit and meet with her. I really wanted to go back because I felt that for the first time, she knew me. She knew my story. I had shared with her all of this stuff, and she knew him. And she sat in the room and she could see the way he interacted with me. even though he tried to hide it. She could see, she was a counselor, she had degrees, she knew what to look for. She was a Christian as well, and so I know she understood the struggle that I had, and so she helped me. She was helping me find my voice, and I didn't want that to end just because he said it was done. So I went back to her on my own against his wishes. He didn't want me there. Every time I had my appointment, the day I would come home from my appointment, he would have attitude. He would be upset. He didn't like the changes that I was making. He didn't like the boundaries. He didn't like the expectations that I was putting on him. It caused a lot of contention between the two of us. But every time that I went and spoke with her, I saw things in a light and in a way that I could see that what I was dealing with was wrong. What he was doing was wrong. And with her showing me scripture and helping me understand that God cared for me as a person more than he cared for my marriage. He cared for me and my health as an individual, as a child of his, more than he cared about whether or not we were going to be a statistic of divorce. So I continued seeing her for, it was probably 2 to 3 years. And each time I got a little stronger. I got a little healthier. My voice came back. I started speaking up. I started sharing that I wanted more from our relationship. I wanted what Christ had said. I had, in this time, also had some Christian friends. I had shared some of the stuff that was going on in our home. And unfortunately, some of them didn't think it was a big deal. Some of them gave me the same pat answers that this Paige Patterson is saying. Pray for him. Pray for him. Pray for him. Which I was doing. I prayed for him for 7 years before he decided to get involved in church again. I prayed for him for years and years and years. And I continued to pray. But at what cost to my own mental health and to my children's mental health was this marriage? So that's what I had to face. I had to face the fact. We even went to a different counselor. He got upset with me about a choice that I had made. And he wasn't going to go back to the counselor we had seen together. He was done with her. So he picked a different counselor. So we went, a very expensive counselor, a very well-known speaker. He had been to our church before, he and his wife. They'd done a marriage conference. We sat in his office and we talked about our marital issues. We talked about the lack of intimacy in our relationship. I shared with this counselor that I felt that I was being emotionally abused by him. I put it in paper. I wrote out all the questionnaires, answered all the questions, and said, I am being emotionally abused by this man. Therefore, I am not going to be intimate with him until he fixes that. I cannot be intimate with someone I'm not connected with. I cannot be intimate with someone who is abusing me. That counselor sat there, looked me dead in the eye, and said, refraining from having intimate relations with your spouse is to be reserved only for prayer and fasting. At that moment, I was done. I knew at that moment he was not hearing me. At that moment, I knew that he would do no good for our relationship. He gave my spouse a CD to watch on godly manhood. What's that going to do? My ex needed someone to look him in the eye and tell him what he was doing was wrong. That did not happen. That did not happen in that counseling session. And I will forever remember that godly man who counsels thousands of people looking me in the eye and telling me that I was supposed to continue in my intimate relationship with an emotionally abusive spouse unless I was praying and fasting. So at that point in time, that to me was the beginning of the end. It was not very long after that when the marriage just started unraveling, and then I just couldn't handle it anymore. I wasn't going to stand by and allow myself to be humiliated and put down. And thankfully, I was able to reach out to a godly Christian friend of mine who believed me. She knew my spouse. She had spent time working with him, and she knew me well enough to believe me. And that's what I'm asking you to do. When a person comes to you and says they're being abused, believe them. That's all you have to do. Believe them. Take their word for it and know. It's probably the hardest thing they've ever had to do, because they care deeply for someone that they have been married to, someone who has a reputation of being a godly, good, upstanding person. You don't want to trash someone's reputation, but for your own mental health and well-being, you want someone to come alongside you and believe you. You want someone to show you that it's okay, that in some situations, divorce is the answer. In my case, divorce was the answer, because there was going to be no reconciliation, because there was no change. There could not be reconciliation because he chose not to change his behavior. He chose instead to become more hateful, more angry, more abusive. So for me, there was no praying and staying in the relationship. I had spent 22 years praying and staying in the relationship. God gave me my out, because if it had not been for the affair, I don't know if I would have had the strength to walk away. I was getting there. I was regaining my strength, but it was coming slowly. So I don't know how many more years I would have stayed in the marriage if it had not been for him going out and having the affair. That, for me, that was it. That wasn't just the first thing that happened. That was the final straw. I knew from that moment it was done. It was over. And I now know that it was probably the best thing to happen for me and for my kids. But once again, I'm asking you, if you have friends in your inner circle, when they share with you struggles with their home life, you've never been behind closed doors of their house. You don't know what goes on. Believe them. Believe what they're telling you, because they may not say it again to you. The one friend I shared with, I never shared again. I knew that that was not a person I could share with. I knew they were not a safe place for me to share my struggles. We've shared other things. We're still friends. But that part of my life, I knew was not they were not a friend to share that with. They were not in a place that they could accept that. I don't know why. Maybe they were too close to my ex. I don't know. What I do know is that no woman should be told to stay in any abusive relationship, whether it's verbal, psychological, physical, no matter the abuse. No woman should be told that God hates divorce, therefore you need to stay in your relationship. No, you know what? God does hate divorce, but you know what he hates more? He hates when his children are oppressed and abused and treated in an unloving manner. God's first commandment to us is to love one another as he loved the church. So let's go out there and love one another and be the light that we're supposed to be to those who are hurting within our church walls and without. Have a great day.